Hello and welcome. We will talk about the developments along the front line, the threat to Bakhmut, how some piece of unattractive, unsexy German equipment is actually right now keeping the supply lines into Bakhmut open, and we will talk more about Prigozhin's fight against the Russian establishment, who is clearly showing the intention to take him out, to take him off the board. We have here, to begin with, we can start with a small video about the Rasputitsa, which has fully arrived in Ukraine right now. This is the mud season. Rasputitsa, as far as I understand it, means like the season of the roads without ground, without bottom. And as we can see here, this is a fairly well description for the regions where it is hit and especially where there are no paved roads. According to the estimates from Lithuania, Russia will be able to keep up the fighting for another 2 years on the same intensity. That shows that any expectations that Russia is going to run out of equipment or material anytime soon, at least according to the Lithuanians, is not justified. On Thursday, there was another big attack on Ukraine with Russian cruise missiles and rockets. Among those were the Russians used 84 missiles. 28 of those were Kh-101 or Kh-555. 20 were Kaliber. 6 were Kh-22, which is an anti-ship missile that is being used here without much expectation to actually hit something. 6 of them were Kh-47 Kinzhal, that's the air-launched hypersonic missile, and 2 were Kh-31P, also anti-ship missiles. 6 were Kh-59 and 13 were S-300. They also used 8 Shahed 136 suicide bombs, loitering munitions. Ukraine is saying they shot down 34 of those missiles, which shows they shot down less than half. Clearly, we can take this as an indication of the Russians adjusting their attack pattern towards what Ukraine can do, clearly adjusting to it to reduce the amount of successful intercepts by the Ukrainians. 6 of those missiles were Kinzhal, and Ukraine itself says that its air defense is more or less useless against it. It can't intercept it with nothing. It has neither with its own S-300 nor with NASAMS nor with IRST, and even the Patriots, who have some capability to take out ballistic missiles, are useless against Kinzhals because of their high speed and their flight pattern. We have another chapter in the story about the Nord Stream pipeline. The US National Security Council speaker Adrienne Watson said that the New York Times story did not come from downgraded intelligence shared by the US government, and sources were not authorized to speak on behalf of the US government. So basically, they more or less say these informations aren't from us. So whatever they claim, we don't sanction it. They don't, on the other hand, they don't explicitly say the whole story is bogus. I read the long German article in Der Spiegel about the story, and it is painting the whole event in a far less decisive light than initially. There are some big questions like why, for instance, was that boat accidentally found by a German investigator, which obviously leads to the question of whether he was paid off to lead the investigators in a certain direction. There are some questions open. A lot of questions actually open in the whole Nord Stream story, and if you read the German article in Der Spiegel, it's turning the whole thing from a decisive breakthrough in the investigation more or less to another theory, as lots of the question are unanswered or even contradicting. That, for instance, 6 persons are supposedly using fake passports, but the company hiring the boat is run by 2 Ukrainians. It's fairly difficult to leave a clearer source of it. Then at the same time, why didn't they charter a boat in Poland where the distance to Bornholm to the explosion places is much shorter, etc., etc. So generally, from what I see, I don't see any reason to say that the solution for we don't have the culprit for the Nord Stream pipeline blow up. the attack on the Nord Stream pipelines. What was published recently, that it's some sources dating in the Ukrainian direction, are not much more than a theory either. Probably a viable theory, a theory worthy of discussion, but unfortunately not more. We are not really any closer to having a final verdict on who did it and how it was done. When it comes to the Ukrainian front line, to the front line in the Ukrainian war, we have numerous attacks north of the Siversky Donetsk. Serhiy Haidai, who is the rightful governor of Luhansk province, so he's the Ukrainian governor of Luhansk province, said that Chervono-Popivka is still contested and the control of the town is changing back and forth. Now, Chervono-Popivka is here, so according to this pro-Ukrainian map, at least 4 kilometers away from the actual lines. So either Serhiy Haidai is massively wrong, or the maps here, and basically all the maps we find are massively wrong. So while we should maybe keep it in the back of our head, it seems highly unlikely that Chervono-Popivka is actually still contested, especially as it's along the Svatove-Kremina highway, and thus very important line of communication. The Russians would have focused their offensive in that direction to push the Ukrainians away if they were actually that close to the highway. Generally, apart from that, fighting is continuing, but we don't see much change in territory. I cannot really confirm any change. We have fighting geolocated pictures, especially in this area here in the south, close to the Siversky Donetsk. There the fighting is continuing. There are, for instance, videos of BMPTs in close proximity fighting in the forests, but I cannot confirm that the Russians have specifically gained some territory in here. South of the Siversky Donetsk, we have confirmed Russian successes close to Spirne, so the Russians have advanced further west here, and we have now image proof that Dubovo-Vasilivka is conquered. As you can see here, it's geolocated, and Dubovo-Vasilivka is down here. So right northwest of Bakhmut, the Russians are advancing. There are also reports of lots of attacks in the direction of Sloviansk, which is up here. The attacks, there are some claims by Russian mill bloggers that the Russians have captured Orikhovo-Vasilivka, which is here. Other attacks seem to be aimed in the direction of Privila. I cannot confirm any significant successes in this area, though, and I cannot really explain to you what the whole idea behind this is, as the area here doesn't seem likely to be needed for an envelopment of Bakhmut, which should be the Russian priority right now. There is some discussion that maybe the idea is to push away the front line from the actual envelopment for the encirclement that is being developed for Bakhmut in case of a Ukrainian counterattack, because as thinner the front is that is being pushed forward around Bakhmut, the easier it is possible for the Ukrainians to cut it through with a decisive counterattack. And from the Russian sides, there is definitely some consideration, some thinking about the fact whether or not there might be a massive counterattack from the Ukrainians coming in the direction of Bakhmut itself, especially as we do have reports of further Ukrainian counterattacks, especially in the direction of Ivanivske, from Ivanivske in the direction of Klishchivka. I cannot confirm that those counterattacks have actually achieved something though, but the Ukrainians do counterattacks in this whole area. The Russian attacks were also reported in the direction of Bodanivka, but apparently those were thwarted, I think is the word, so they were repulsed. The Ukrainians were able to hold that direction. Other than that, we have reports of Russians pushing in the north and pushing in the south, especially in this area here is heavy fighting is ongoing. The Russians obviously want to reach the T0504, which is that road here, cut it off and reduce the potential for the Ukrainians to use roads. They want to cut the Ukrainian lines of communication in this direction. Further than that, we have the reports of ongoing fighting around Avdiivka. The Russians have been successful in the north here, in the direction of Krasnohorivka in the last few days. and there is fighting going on in the south as well. There are now claims by Russian military bloggers that the defensive lines at Severny have been cut, have been broken through. I've even found a claim that Severny is already captured by the Russians. There's also claims that the Ukrainians withdrew from the south of Avdiivka further north into the industrial area of the town. I cannot confirm that either, but there might be the option that the Russians have advanced further in the direction of Avdiivka itself and here west of it, also with the aim to envelop it in total. Further south, we have fighting around Marinka. The Russians are still claiming they have achieved successes in Pobieda. I cannot confirm any fresh successes since the last situation report, but they are definitely seem to be directly at the outskirts of the town and thus threatening an envelopment of Marinka from the south as well increasingly. Other than that, in the whole area, we still have fighting at Vuhledar in Donetsk Oblast, but that fighting seems to not have achieved anything whatsoever. In the southern front, we don't have any big new reports apart from the usual artillery fire, but we have further reports of commando activities on the Dnipro Islands from both sides. Each side is claiming they defeated the other, they destroyed some boats, they did this, they did that. Now and then we have videos of shelling, of fighting being there, but basically those islands are still contested and both sides try to keep a foothold on there and fight the other in small engagements. Generally, the situation, though, has not changed overall too much. The Russians are still pushing towards Bakhmut, but the Ukrainian leadership, both military and civilian, has decided to fight for Bakhmut and is reportedly sending reinforcements. So we will have to see. There are some strong criticisms on the internet, even from Ukrainian soldiers on the front line, claiming that it's about to become from a fortress to a graveyard, Bakhmut. But we will have to see whether the decision to continue the defense of Bakhmut will be a wise one or not. That obviously will massively depend on the reinforcements that the Ukrainians are sending there. Gazprom is now being reported to have sent have created its own paramilitary force. Now, this is here still saying it's a PMC, but supposedly it's a volunteer unit, but it's under the umbrella of Gazprom, of the big company that is now hiring people. And the interesting part is that it's paying massively more than Wagner, another sign that volunteers who might go to Wagner for financial gains, as he's saying here, twice as high as Wagner, which would mean that they basically have no reason to go to Wagner anymore, and Wagner's troops would further be reduced, would further crumble down with every loss they are taking. This is likely signed off by the Russian government and aimed at depriving Wagner from recruits. We heard it in the past. It's probably 3 months ago that I reported it in a situation report that Gazprom is supposedly establishing its own PMC. At that point, it was signed off by the Russian government as a protection group for its own installations, but now reports are that they are already in the so-called Donetsk People's Republic, recruiting there, and are possibly already engaged in combat. Veterans, and there's also reports that the Russian government has signed off that veterans of volunteer units can now register themselves as veterans of the war with all the benefits involved. But the important thing is the rule says this is for volunteer groups that have been established to support the Russian armed forces during the Ukraine war, or as they would probably call it, the special military operation. The fact is, Wagner was not created for this, so in this regard, it might actually exclude Wagner. I have no way of confirming right now if a Wagner mercenary who fought there and is trying to get registered as a veteran will be refused that, but at least it looks like this, another sign that the Russian government wants to more or less take out Wagner without doing it directly with kinetic or judicial force. Ukrainians are saying that in Donetsk and Luhansk, schools are being asked to register all male students that are being born before the 1st of April 2006. That would mean they are 17 years old right now. And on April the 1st is supposedly the next wave for the conscription of Russia, of the Russian armed forces. So that would be an indication that the Russians are actually intending to conscript 17-year-olds in Luhansk and Donetsk, which supposedly is a part of Russia, but at the same time is more or less treated as a colony with disposable manpower, where the Russian government has even less regards of than for the rest of Russia as they see it. In the political sphere, we have now some news about the fighting about the fighting and and Prigozhin's position within the government. The Wall Street Journal has said that Prigozhin still didn't get any ammunition. They reported that he said his phone numbers with the authorities have been cut, so he can't reach anyone anymore. He's no longer allowed to enter government buildings. All of this are clearly a sign that he has overstepped his boundaries and is now being cut down to size. And he said his only way of influencing anything is now the public, is the media. One day later, he mentioned that he has now received ammo and was specifically thanking a armaments factory and the deputy prime minister of Russia. But at the same time, we see how Prigozhin's star is definitely falling as of now. From Transnistria, we have some news. That's this region here. It's internationally recognized as a part of Moldova. They are saying that so their separatist government, which is Russia supported, are saying they accuse 6 persons who are Ukrainians, and most of them, at least part of them, are SBU agents, which is the Ukrainian intelligence agency, that they wanted to murder the Transnistrian president. That seems highly unlikely, because the intention for Ukraine to actually do that, what would be the gain of killing the president? So it seems likely that this is some kind of something either caused with false flag or directly instructed towards Transnistria to heat up the situation, as obviously any kind of mobilization within Transnistria. If Transnistrian government actually believes that the Ukrainians might invade it, then they will mobilize, and every additional soldier Transnistria musters, no matter the quality, will force the Ukrainians to establish stronger positions around Transnistria as well, basically fixing more troops in place, as the Ukrainians have it's absolutely unacceptable for them to take the risk that Odessa could be threatened from Transnistria, and thus allowing then an amphibious invasion as a support to all of this. So if Transnistria increases its troop strength, Ukraine will have no choice but to send troops of their own, and that is clearly, or that's at least the most logical explanation for everything that's going on in Transnistria right now, that not only is Russia actually interested in taking over the region, but until that point, until they've conquered the area to reach it, they want to stir up the pot as much as they can to force Ukrainians to fix stronger units in place. That's all in conjunction with the report that there was a coup planned by Russia to take out the democratic government of Moldova, which is pro-Western. And right now they are stirring up the pot as well with social media campaign, with a hybrid warfare against Moldovan government, which is stirring up the pro-Russian parts of the population to overthrow the government. When it comes to international support, we now have these reports here that the US military is thinking about how to mount AIM 120 MRAMs to Ukrainian jets. That would be a massive improvement to the Ukrainians, as they don't have any active radar homing missiles, and this is a semi-active radar homing missile, the AIM 120, meaning that with the missiles the Ukrainians have right now, they need to keep the nose of their plane pointed towards a Russian plane, meaning they decrease the distance between them and the Russians, while the Russian not only knows he's being targeted, but can respond in kind, making shoot downs very unlikely, and at the same time meaning that the planes themselves are put into much risks. The Ukrainians simply don't have any other missiles, so should the Americans be able to integrate AMRAAMs into the Ukrainian fighter jets, that would obviously massively increase their combat capabilities and their survivability in air combat as well. Whether that's possible is a completely different story, though, because this is more than pre-programming missile like the harm was, like it's likely done with the harm, and then simply hot wiring something so the missile gets the order to ignite its engine and follow its flight path. Here, there would have to be communication between the radar, between the pilot, between the computer on board of the jet with the missile, and that is not something that can be jerry-rigged. Some analysts say that takes years and years to implement, and we see that from everywhere in the world. Whenever some nations rearrange their setup, it really takes years, and you can even look into, for instance, Egypt, who is using planes from various different national sources, that in the majority of those cases, they don't fly with missiles from the other planes because it's simply too complicated to integrate them. You have the Mirage 2000 mostly flying with French missiles, the F-16 mostly with Americans, and the Russian Soviet planes flying with Russian or Soviet air-to-air missiles, as remodifying it is extremely complicated. But at least the US apparently is looking into the topic. Whether they'll be successful is a whole different story, though. We have a news from Reuters is saying that South Korea actually gave permission to export to Poland its Crab howitzers. So apparently the Crab has some South Korean components, which would have required South Korean permission to give them to Ukraine, and South Korea did allow it, which obviously should have helped to sign that massive defense deal, as it's not too popular right now to have to buy weapons from a nation which then will not allow you to hand it over or to use it how you see fit. And Switzerland is about to learn that lesson as well, as the future of the Swiss defense industry is probably very bleak, with the government right now refusing basically any handover of weaponry towards Ukraine, even if it's most direly needed. And the weapons, the ammunition or the weapons are already in someone else's property. So it wouldn't even be that Switzerland is delivering them themselves. They simply ban the nation it was exported to give it to Ukraine. And we have a very interesting video here that is this here. What we see right in front of us is Bakhmut, and this is the road from Kholmove. At least that's what I find here. That's what it says. And if you pay attention, you see this is supposedly the bridge that was blown up. Initially, it was said the Ukrainians blew it up, maybe because there were some speculations that maybe they blew it up to make sure that the Russians who were currently advancing can't cross it and cut into Bakhmut from another angle. Other reports were that the Russians blew it up to cut the line of communication. But whoever it was, it's now being, in quotation mark, rebuilt. And what we see here is, apart from anything I find, it's clearly the bridging system from a German Biber, which is the Panzerschnellbrücke Biber, basically meaning tank fast bridge Biber, a system to lay bridging system over small rivers, over small gaps. And as we can see here, it is clearly done here, and supposedly the gap between those bars is a clear sign of it being the Biber. So in this regard, one system that is given to Ukraine, which is far less sexy than some air defense system, then some tank, might actually be responsible for the Ukrainians to have another line of communication into Bakhmut still open in this regard. Also, there are some Twitter rumors right now being spread around that Pakistan has offered 44 of its T-80UD to Ukraine. I can't find any serious confirmation. There's one blog taking it up now after I initially found it, but I don't find anything from a credible source. So we should it's not too likely that it's going to happen, but I can't simply fully ignore it. At the same time, the interesting part here is that those T-80UDs are actually Ukrainian made. Ukraine sold them to Pakistan in the early 90s and delivered them, I think, between 96 and 99 or something like this. It was roughly 360 more or less, so a sizable number, and they are not Russian made, but they are actually Ukrainian made, produced in Ukraine after the breakup of the Soviet Union, and they have been sold to Pakistan. So it's possible that Pakistan is willing, under with some financial aid, to hand them over. We have increasing amounts of Pakistani weaponry showing up in Ukraine, likely for that very reason, that Pakistan is in dire need of financial aid and it has something to sell that is currently being paid for fairly well. But whether we'll actually see that Pakistan is going to take the step of delivering main battle tanks into Ukraine, even if it's for payment, seems as of now fairly unlikely, or at least highly questionable whether that's true. And as said, I cannot find any credible source on that right now. I cannot say it's never going to happen. I can't say it's not true, but as of now, I don't find any credible source on that. And finally, we have some news from the Danish defense minister. He's saying Ukraine will receive its first Leopard 1 at the beginning of May, and until the end of the year, 80 to 90 are supposedly going to be delivered. And finally, we have some news here about the former US President Trump. In a German news article, it says that he had an interview with Sean Hannity, and there he basically said that he would have made a deal with Russia to end the war within 24 hours. I think we've talked about it here in the past as well, that Trump has said that, and my judgment was the only way to make Russia give up the war, to end its assault, is by basically forcing Ukraine to capitulate. And what he's saying here is exactly that. In the worst case, he would have made a deal where Russia annexes something, because there are some regions where they speak Russian. So while Trump was the first US president who has given lethal aid to Ukraine, don't forget the Javelin missiles were sent under his presidency, not under Obama's. It was as of now at least, it is that he is claiming that it would have been possible that he made a peace deal with Putin, handing over parts of Ukraine to Russia. That's it for me for now. What do you think about today's news? What do you think about Trump's idea, Trump's supposedly offer, or that Trump would have given up parts of Ukraine to Russia to end the war? What do you think about this? Leave your comment in the comment section if you enjoyed what I did here. If you enjoyed this video, hit the thumbs up button. This channel is only possible because of the support from viewers like you. So if you like to support the channel, you can do so by the means in the description. Thank you very much to everyone already supporting it. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I would like to invite you to subscribe, hit the bell icon so you don't miss future videos. Tomorrow I will publish a video about the 5 best tanks that Ukraine is currently receiving. That might be interesting for you as well. You won't miss future videos like this if you subscribe and hit the bell icon. That's it from me for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll be back.